2,500 years ago, here in Altai, people saw the eternal blue sky and called it Tengri. And we have at least once in our life to visit Altai, drink its spring water, and look at its sky, the purest in the world, in order to change ourselves. It was the rise of Bronze Age civilization in the steppes from the Alps to Lake Baikal lived nomadic pastoralists who possessed the secret of the smelting of bronze. The Scythian Sarmatian culture was dominant throughout the entire steppe region. Then the first migration of peoples occurred. The Altai was abandoned by the tribes who then inhabited the north of Europe. Centuries have passed. Everything seems to be gone, but nothing is forgotten. The map kept what people don't remember. The name of the tribes who lived in the northeast Kazakhstan and the Altai Mountains in the middle of the first millennium BC was known to the ancient Greeks as the guarding gold barbels, because at that time, the largest gold mines were there. Herodotus, the father of history, mentions them as people unknown to the world, inhabitants of the faraway eastern mountains. The Sakai tribes were contemporaries of the Scythians, who lived in the northern Black Sea and the Dnieper region, the Persians of the time of Cyrus and Darius I, and the Greeks in the era of Alexander the Great. At the initiative of Daniel Akhmetov, Hakim of Eastern Kazakhstan, a program advancing scientific research in the field of archaeology was developed and successfully implemented. It was aimed at the preservation and efficient use of natural and recreational potential and historical and cultural heritage of the region. This is a new contribution to the history of the Kazakhs, the history of our country. It is very important that this work is systematic. We know that these great lands were preserved thanks to the heroism of our ancestors. These huge areas were being protected by our people. And, of course, on the eve of the 25th anniversary, we express gratitude to all our ancestors, this heroic generation that defended this vast territory and retained the great history of our country. In short, we want to combine modern reality and our remarkable historical past. The program makes a significant contribution to the study of the history of the territory, the development of the region as a modern tourist cluster. The archaeological research is to be conducted by the leading archaeologists of Kazakhstan and foreign countries. After participation in many excavations in Kazakhstan, I have to say that these expeditions are very important and useful for understanding not only the history of Kazakhstan, but also the history of Central and Eastern Europe. The study of archaeological monuments in Kazakhstan allows us to reconstruct the processes of interrelations of different cultural traditions. It expands the base of evidence that the territory of Kazakhstan was one of the centers of historical and cultural synthesis. It is in the depths of this synthesis that many achievements of culture of the peoples of Kazakhstan exist. The program, according to which the monuments of history are now being studied, is aimed at the development of archaeology in the context of reconstruction of ancient history. If in this necropolis we explore the Sakai and Turkic artifacts, for example, in the Chalitki area, this is the early Sakai period, before our Beryl period. Farther, in Elike Sazi and in Abai district, there are also Sakai monuments. That is the main focus, is placed on the Sakai artifacts. Monuments of archaeology and ancient art are our national shrines, for they retain the spirituality of the nation and educate the people of Kazakhstan in the spirit of love for their native history and its cultural heritage. Despite the impetuous events, despite the fact that some disappeared, others emerged. Some ethnic group always remained in this area. And then the continuity between different generations of people was preserved. There was a Sakai stratum in the 4th to 3rd centuries BC, and then after some time there already appeared the Turkic ethnic group in the 4th century AD. These tribes build on their graves to these burial mounds of the Sakai era. Here are 3 strata: late Sakai formation, the Proto-Turkic stratum, a Turkic stratum, and a post-Turkic stratum. These formations clearly differ from each other in the direction of the head of the deceased, in the burial technique, the architecture of burial vaults. They are different in the burial ceremony as a whole, but a kind of continuity is there, and some sense of accord is still felt. That's what we want to capture. Many pages of history are still undiscovered. Others, even if cast light upon, do not give a complete picture of the historical reality. The white spots of ancient history are often a highly speculative basis for the myth-making of amateurs and biased experts. The main task of an archaeologist should not be competition for his own version of history, but a sincere desire to find the truth rooted in a love for their country and their countrymen.
Сендердің барлықтарың археолог ретінде, болашақ археолог ретінде соны түсінсін деймін де, соны жан дүниемен түсінетін болса.
Our task is not only looking for gold, but also understanding that world, the world of ancient civilization. We should not forget that archaeology is the study of the history of our native land, our native people. And we have to prove that this is our history. It is impossible to talk about the future without knowing the past. Mountainous and high mountainous areas of the Altai, the Kalbinsky Ridge, and Tarbagatai, the steppes in the north, semi-deserts, and deserts in the south. This is the varied landscape of East Kazakhstan. Wide valleys with fertile soils, pastures, numerous deposits of copper, tin, gold in the mountains. The rivers rich in fish, forests full of wildlife, all this contributed to the emergence and dynamic development of the Bronze Age culture. The administrative area of East Kazakhstan, if you look from a historical geographical point of view, is convenient for life. For example, the Altai, Tarbagatai, Chingiz Tau, Kalbanaram ridges, large rivers, and lakes. All this creates the most favorable conditions for dwelling. And our research proved this. In East Kazakhstan, archaeologists have found various artifacts related to the periods ranging from Stone and Bronze Age to the Turkic and Sakai era. This in turn proves that the tribes from the east moved to other regions. These places are the most favorable for human activity. They have for centuries attracted attention. In general, the nature in the last 2,500 years has not changed much in quality. So these fertile places were chosen by the Sakai peoples and their ancestors who lived in the Bronze Age. This land became the homeland for many ethnoses, ethnic groups, state formations. And huge, very exciting, tempestuous ethno-cultural processes took place in this area. Most of the monuments of the late Bronze Age are situated in the valley of the main water artery of East Kazakhstan, the Irtysh River. In the south, they are common in the Zaysan couple. The biggest of them, called Royal Mounds, are located in Chilitki Valley and in the mountains of the southern Altai on the bank of the river Bukhtarma. The Altai sub-region has been poorly studied, although this territory has always attracted attention from eminent scientists. One of them was Radlov, whose name is associated with the first excavations conducted on a scientific basis. During the excavation here, he first encountered the permafrost. The burial mound, of course, was disturbed, robbed. Few of these burial mounds remained intact. Permafrost meant complete preservation. The mountains and steppes were in no hurry to reveal their treasures. The scientists took what was on the surface. However, what they found was quite convincing. Here on deserted lands, they discovered traces of ancient settlements, huge burial mounds, gravestone monuments, the likes of which have not been and are not now in any country of the world. What people own these priceless treasures? Who lived in these abandoned areas? These questions have long remained unanswered. Altai appeared a mysterious treasure island in the heart of Asia. Mystery, like a fog, is surrounding it.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got to punch it again. Thanks a lot. Altitude, velocity, light. 220 feet. 15 forward.
Burial ground numbers about 70 mounds, with stone embankments of various sizes. It is based on several parallel chains of mounds, elongated in the direction from northwest to southeast. The Burel necropolis became widely known in 1998, thanks to the unique findings in one of the large mounds, designated as number 11. Burel Burial Ground is a distinctive shrine, the burial place of the nobility and the leaders who created a unique and vibrant culture known in science as the Pazyryk. The mountain became world famous thanks to the found artistic products. The funerary inventory is represented by some items of horse equipment, weapons, and ornaments made of bronze, gold, silver, and bones. The unique finds of mound number 11 are the only original findings of organics in the territory of Kazakhstan. We want this place to be visited. In general, we expect that in 5 years in Usk-Kamenogorsk, there a new museum will be built where all the artifacts will be saved and brought to. But what is here today excites, inspires joy, and soon we will fund this project, and these unique artifacts will be stored under a sarcophagus. In the Burel Valley, scientists plan to make a museum in the open air, where visitors can see artifacts of the Sakai period, found during archaeological excavations. In the course of ongoing field studies, in mound number 2 were found human remains and 7 sacrificial horses, which date back to the late 4th century BC. In the burial practices of the ancient Burel people, there was a complex ritual which involved the preservation of the body of the deceased. With the help of special herbs, the aromatics, the bodies of revered people had been subject to embalming.
I basically do ancient DNA study. It means that
The study of human remains in Kazakhstan is very important for us mainly because the first man was found in Africa. Only then of mankind proliferated to the northern part of Eurasia. Therefore, we believe that Kazakhstan is a very important place to study the history of human civilization.
We have our own laboratory in Japan.
In Almaty and Astana, there are laboratories that work together with the laboratories of Japan. We have an opportunity to take bones, make the necessary tests, bring them to the laboratory, and study them there. Such research takes at least 3 years.
Then to study DNA.
Altitude, velocity, light. 220 feet. 15 forward.
In 2003, another royal mound was excavated at the Chalitki burial ground. It turned out to have a similar construction, consisting of a log frame and the mound. Chalitki mound dates back to the 7th century BC. It is one of the earliest royal burial mounds of the northern steppe zone of Kazakhstan and one of the oldest in Eurasia. The burial was robbed in antiquity. Scythian burial mounds have been enthusiastically plundered for over 2 millennia. Nevertheless, there were found a number of artistic works that relate to the original art of the Sakai Scythian world. We are now in a huge Chalitki Valley. The valley is more than 100 kilometers long and 30 kilometers wide. This is where people have lived since the Bronze and Iron Age until today. According to the results of research carried out since 2003, We counted more than 500 burial grounds related to the Iron Age. The most unique among them are the royal burial mounds, which number more than 50 pieces. Now our excavations are carried out in one of these mounds. The height of the burial ground before the excavation was 8 meters, 60 centimeters, and the diameter is 88 meters. As you can see, the excavation of such huge mounds requires special equipment. Mound number 16, dated by the middle of the 7th century BC, is one of the largest of the 200 stone mounds.
Енді оның ішінде заманында сонау 49 жылдан бастап анау Санкт-Петербург университетінің
Since 1949, these areas have been investigated by Chernikov, a researcher from St. Petersburg University. And since 2003, by an archaeological expeditions of Al-Farabi University, headed by me. Until that time, we studied 3 large burial grounds. In the very first, which is situated in bygone, we found 4,303 pieces of gold jewelry. Then we had these pieces assembled, so we have found the 4th gold man. Thanks to the work of scientists who perform grand archaeological research and restoration work, visitors of the Museum of Nazarbayev Center in Astana have the opportunity to learn about the culture of the population of the Kazakh Altai in the end of the 1st millennium BC. A unique exhibit of the exhibition hall is the recreated image of the horse from the burial of a representative of the nomadic elite, which allows our contemporaries to touch the mysterious world of the ancient inhabitants of the Valley of Kings. We are in the Chiliktinskaya Valley, on the grave of a warrior buried with his horse. I think that the moment belongs to the Pazyryk culture, to the burial period in the Eurasian steppe. Looking at the style of burial of these vessels, we assume that the burial belongs to the later Saka or early Usan period. For sure, it will be known after we examine these materials. Among the findings, we have found a bronze awl. Such well-preserved awls are rare. The archaeologist needs to spend weeks digging in the dirt, being careful not to damage evidence, getting out of the ground pottery fragments which make up to 90% of the finds. Then the objects need a long time to be sorted, matched, sketched, and described. This titanic work is carried out in order for other researchers to use this material to confirm or disprove their scientific hypotheses. For example, even one short phrase like, "The pottery from such and such settlement," points to a connection with such and such culture, has behind it hundreds of hours of hard work. After excavation of all layers, 3 meters below the surface, we open the stone surface of the tomb. Now we are clearing the stone layer and carrying out excavation in the open sites, and at the same time making drawings of what the mound looks like as a whole. We will unearth 2 to 2.5 meters more. After everything is dug up, cleaned, and photographed, we will proceed to the next stage, complete opening of this stone layer. Then we will discover what lies under the stones, a wooden house where a person is buried. Archaeology is the science of antiquities. It studies the history of society by material traces of people's lives, establishes where and how people lived thousands of years ago. By the found ruins of ancient cities, burials, barely visible drawings on the rocks, fragments of broken crockery, archaeologists conduct their painstaking search, recreating the pictures of the past. The people had knowledge about the properties of the materials that were needed when building mounds. It was immediately evident that they had calculated the future size of the mound, its diameter, its height, the way they should be. Archaeology is an amazing science. It allows you to enjoy an ordinary stone. You rejoice simply because thousands of years ago, this stone was touched by the hand of another person. There is a feeling of some contact, the connection with the ancestors, the original feeling. Then the feeling of a discoverer, because this item from the beginning was dug with a shovel, then cleaned with a brush, and finally with a paintbrush. And after some time, I got to it, cleaned it, held it in my hands. This is the feeling of a discoverer. It is a very powerful feeling. Today, a bridle is a usual thing, but few people know that it first appeared in the Altai subregion. The horse pushed the boundaries of the ancient Altai, opened distant roads, became a new means of transport and drought power, the leitmotif of the progress of the Bronze Age. These are the first horse breeders who saddled the horse. The assimilation of the horse occurred long ago, several thousand years ago, yet riding it was mastered only at the beginning of the first millennium BC. And from this moment begins a very interesting stage in the history of mankind: fast movement, fast contact, and, correspondingly, fast ethno-cultural processes. The Bronze Age followed the Stone Age. The wealth of Kazakhstan in polymetals gave rise to the centers of ancient metallurgy on its territory. Of course, it took more than one day or 1 year for people to understand that metal is more reliable than stone. Only gradually, bronze became the main raw material for making tools and weapons.
Мынау қазір біз орналасқан 40 үңгір қорымы жалпы көлемі оңтүстігінен солтүстігіне қарай 1,5.
This place is called the Kırık Ungur burial ground. The size of the burial from south to west is about 1.5 kilometers. There are mountains of early, middle, and late Bronze Age, mountains of the early Iron Age, Han and Sarmatian, and Turkic period. The number of monuments in these places totals more than 100. Burial grounds of ancient people belong to the Middle Bronze Age. A large monument, which we are now examining, belongs to the Late Bronze Age. The main reason for the expansion of the mounds was a rich supply of metal. These people had developed trade relations with Southwest Asia and Siberia. They sold metal, and this had an impact on the social status of society. The scale of ore mining in the Bronze Age on the territory of East Kazakhstan allowed people not only to meet their own needs in raw materials, but to use part of metal in the form of billets and products for exchange. One can with certainty say that it was one of the centers of ancient metallurgy. Here are the decorations that were found in the excavations carried out this year. Judging by all parameters, we can say that they belong to the early Bronze Age. What we see now is made of bronze. These ornaments are also made of bronze. Women didn't wear them in their ears, but attached them to their hair. The Kırık Ungur burial complex is located 2 kilometers north of Toktamis Batır village, on one of the hills between the 2 Muslim cemeteries of our period. The site consists of monuments of different periods: the Bronze Age, Sakai, Hun Sarmat, and Turkic, which are closely located in a small area about 1 square kilometer. In total, the burial ground has more than 200 objects stretched from southeast to northwest. This year started archaeological excavations at mound number 27. In the cemetery, there are 6 elite monuments, the study of which can yield unprecedented findings.
Бұл ескерткіштің сыртқы құрылысы тас обасына байланысты және қабірінің қазылуына байланысты ескерткіштің орналасу ерекшелігіне.
The outer part of the monument, the stone burial, and its location prove that it belongs to the early Iron Age, particularly to the Hun Sarmatian period. And another proof is the pottery and fragments of metal that we have excavated in the adjacent burial ground.
Металдың қалдығы табылған болатын.
Ceramic houseware played a significant part in the life of the inhabitants of ancient settlements. All of it was intended for use in the economy and everyday life. Potters of the Bronze Age were mostly women who produced vessels by the method of manual molding, subjected them to firing, and put the decoration on afterwards. Here, a mound of the nomadic elite of the early nomads of East Kazakhstan is extensively excavated. In this mound, we hope to discover unique findings that will more fully reveal the picture of the early nomadic period. The burial grounds give a lot of information that we can implement in the science of history. The Elike Saza II burial ground is located in Tarbagatai district of East Kazakhstan region, 92 kilometers northeast of Aksuat, the district center. The site has two groups of mound chains of different sizes. It is divided into eastern and western groups of burials. This valley can be called the Valley of the Kings. You probably noticed that in addition to this mound, there are huge visible hills in the valley. These are the tomb structures of the nomadic elite of the Sakai, who roamed here in the first millennium BC. It would be difficult to name another region of Eurasia where there are so many of them. East Kazakhstan is truly a museum under the open sky. The place where we are now standing is called Jailao Yelike Saza. There are 7 burial grounds consisting of more than 300 burial mounds. They are different in size. For example, there are mounds whose diameter is 120 meters and the height is 5 meters. There are also ordinary mounds. Judging by external forms, the mounds belong to the early Saka period. For several decades, the science of history has had a confirmed view that the statehood on the territory of Kazakhstan was conceived in Hun Osun period, that is the 3rd to 2nd centuries BC. Our field studies provide an opportunity to push this fact farther in the past, to the 8th to 5th century BC. Thus, the beginning of statehood in the territory of Kazakhstan is moved almost 1,000 years back in history, and it can be judged in the context of such ancient states as the Achaemenid Iran, ancient Greece, China, Bactria, and Khwarezm.
Государство – это территория, народ и культура, которую он создал за тысячелетия.
A state means the territory, the people, and the culture that the people created over the millennia. These are 3 important components, which in general are the basis of a state. That is why a state without culture is nothing. Culture is a fundamental element of any state. Its study allows resolving any international conflict, allows us to better understand, and the younger generation to realize its importance and its greatness. The culture of these people is not invented by historians or politicians. It's not abstract, but very precise and specific in its detail. The history of the people is not a free narrative, but a science, strict and exact as mathematics or physics. Just like a people is not only a group of people gathered together. It is common for someone to get together and call themselves the people, not having a common history, or rather, not having common ancestors. So, maybe it's customs, traditions, and centuries-old common history that creates people. Kazakhstan is an amazing country with amazing tolerance, rapprochement of denominations and religions. And by the example of Kazakhstan, we can see the convergence of cultures along the Silk Road and among particular countries and people. Kazakhstan is characterized by the fact that it served as a bridge between Europe and Asia. And the Silk Road stretched for many thousands of kilometers along this bridge. It was not only for commodities, not only for some of the achievements of science, but also culture. Religions, including Buddhism, moved along this Silk Road. Ablaykit is a Jungar, fortified Buddhist monastery of the 17th century. Since ancient times, it attracted the attention of famous scientists as a magnificent example of a Lamaist monastery fortress. Jungar feudal lords, Taishi, tried to substantially explore this region, erecting fortresses and Buddhist temples.
Этот храм был построен в 1654 году, и построил его Тайджи Аблай.
This temple was built in 1654 by the Buddhist builders who came from Tibet. The construction was funded by Taji Ablai. This was an amazing building, which once adorned everything in this area and was famous for the fact that it was some kind of center of culture and religion. The main base the temple stood on is a rectangular tetragon, oriented from north to south. The temple and residential buildings were located at the foot of the spur and surrounded by a wall. The plan, building construction, and building materials will be examined. And, in the end, Those ancient drawings that remained from the 17th century will be the basis for reconstructing the complex, which once attracted pilgrims and was a feast for the eyes. In 2016, on the territory of the temple complex, which occupies a dominant position on the site, were obtained unique finds, fragments of birch bark manuscripts of Buddhist texts in the Old Mongolian language that had lain here for almost 350 years. The scientists studied the area of the southern fortress wall with the ruins of the central gate.
Часть стен мощных проходит по долинной части, низменной часть проходит по.
Part of the walls passes along the lowland part of the valley, and the other is stretched along the mountains. That is, the temple was fortified on all the sides, using the terrain. The fortress wall of the temple is a mighty fortification built of stone and soil. The height of the walls reached 3 to 4 meters. The location for the fortress was chosen very well. This is a spur of the granite mountains, surrounded on all sides by valleys of the Talde and the Talde-Bulak rivers. The fortress dominates the valley of the Abla-Ketka River, the Sabine Lakes, and closes the path from the west to the valley of the Targin and further to the Irtysh River. The Great Temple immediately became a place not only for pilgrimage, not only for the conversion of new adherents and proselytes to this religion, but a center of culture, science, and literature. Priceless hieroglyphy manuscripts brought from Lhasa were kept there. There were monks who scribed and propagated the sacred sutra. As a result of internecine wars of Jungar feudal lords in 1671, a part of the temple was burned down and destroyed. Unfortunately, some of the manuscripts burned, but a large part of it still remained. It is now kept at the Institute of Oriental Manuscripts in St. Petersburg. In the first quarter of the 18th century, Kazakhstan and Central Asia attracted increased interest of Peter I. It was after the foundation of Usk-Menogorsk Fortress that the manuscripts, delivered from Ablai-Kit and sent to Peter I, became known to the world. When he saw these amazing writings and Buddhist sculptures, and some antique copies, large sculptures, Roman and Byzantine things, the Tsar was so surprised that he immediately ordered the manuscripts be sent to Paris, as there were no experts in Russia at that time. And that's exactly what found its way to Russia, and from Russia to Europe. The beginning of the development of Tibetan studies, the study of Tibetan Buddhism on the world scale. It is difficult to underestimate the value of Ablai-Kit in history. It's huge. The manuscripts found in Ablai-Kit were the first to attract the attention of the academic world to East Asian literature. Europe, for the first time, caught a glimpse of the treasure trove of Buddhist literature due to the finding in East Kazakhstan. We are in the very secluded province, the heart of the Eurasian continent. And the spirit of these places is the spirit unseen, responsible for peace and comfort, cooperation and development on the planet. We are the people whose historical ethnogenesis has been clearly read since the beginning of time. So, describing the peoples of ancient Scythia, Herodotus mentions us, the inhabitants of the Far East Mountains, as the most fair, to whom all neighbors applied for court and counsel after quarrels and lawsuits, tribal hatred, and vituperation. We are the descendants of those nomads whose justice, simplicity of manners and customs, the harmony of the social system, was the envy of the enlightened Greeks of the slave-owning Athens. It was here that during the construction of the future Great Wall of China, the ancient Han people fled to the north, the steppe, saying that the Huns had more fun and freer lives. This has shaped up over the centuries. So worked the wheel of the history of the Great Steppe, where large and small states were born and fell. That all those who did not have a place in the palaces and tents of the rulers, of the people, went from age to age to the mountains, the taiga and the steppe. They found shelter and protection in the Altai at the crossroads of Central Asia and Siberia. That's why people here in their humble yurt could always make room, giving place near the hearth to the newly arrived, no matter what kind he was. Should he recognize the law of the steppe and the mountains, the code of brotherhood and of solidarity, equality and freedom. It is our homeland. It is our home. And our people have been living here since ancient times, with its name and with its history, with its spirit and its fate destiny. In the spirit lies our strength. It is also the key to our prosperity in the future.